Do you have any idea of what is taking place around the international communities? Is it being talked about in the news with Russia and China joining forces, creating new alliances amongst other world nations to unpeg from the US dollar, forming their new alliance? These things are not talked about in the media, like the big real world events that we need to know about, things that are going to change and impact our generation and generations to come. Instead, we're worried about indicting Donald Trump and freaking dog and pony show. But guys, you need to be aware of what is taking place. You need to be aware what's happening to the US dollar, and if they unpeg it from the petrodollar, US dollar loses its buying power, and in the international community, big changes are taking place. So the BRICS agreement is the new alliance that basically they're pushing United States to the side, saying, hey, we're tired of you guys bullying us around. And obviously the leadership in this current administration, there's nothing to say, right? I'm speechless. I'm at shock. But I encourage you guys, listen to this interview. Very, very insightful. All real, all current events that you need to be aware of. I encourage you to watch it in its entirety. There's a lot of key takeaways and stuff that you need to be aware of.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki. This is emergency podcast number 2. I hope there's not a number 3, but I tell you, that saying, may you live in interesting times. I think this is interesting, spooky, and empire changing. I think we're watching the end of the American empire. And there's a law called Gresham's Law. And Gresham's Law says bad money drives out good money. So this is bad money here. It's called the US dollar. I call it toilet paper today. And this is good money here. This is silver, and this is gold. So what happened in 64 and 71, they took the gold out of this paper, toilet paper right here. And in 64, they took it out of our silver coins. So Gresham's Law is in action today. America has been kind of a bully because we had the reserve currency of the world. So this is emergency podcast number 2. This number 1, please go to it, is burning up the airways right now. Our special friend and always at the right time is, Andy Scheckman. And he is adding so much dimension to my thoughts. And I think his wisdom and his experience and his foresight as to what's happening in the world is crucial. So this is emergency podcast number 2. The thing we're going to be talking about today is what happens if and when Mexico joins the BRICS. What are the repercussions? What are the shockwaves? What's going to happen? Or as they say in Hispanic, ¿qué pasa? What's going to happen? So welcome once again, Andy. This is number two, in a couple of days.
The BRICS formation is something that I have been singularly focused on for the last few years, certainly. And I know you wanted me to just briefly describe what the BRICS are to your listeners. And for those that haven't been following this information, I think it's really very, very, very important. And, I'd like to first throw out that so many things are happening all around us. And while they're significant, these individual events in and of themselves have less significance than when you put them all together. And the things that are happening inside, the blunders, if you will, that are happening inside the United States only exacerbate the consequences that are happening and the realities that are happening outside the border. In other words, the US blunders, I believe, are inspiring the rest of the world, the international community, to unite in opposition to it and in joint establishment of mutually beneficial platforms of politics and economy and trade and currency and finance and culture and education and international security. And all of these things that, as you mentioned, the bullying and the sanctions and the hegemony and the hypocrisy of the West, I believe, is coming to an end. And it is those types of actions by the West that I think has squandered the good graces that we have had for many years of the international community. And when we talk about the BRICS,
1 second. Let me summarize what Andy said. America has pissed off the rest of the world.
yeah, yes,
We've been the bully. We've been the bully with this thing. We're now a credit-based economy. In other words, we print fake money and we spread it throughout the world. But the rest of the world is actually producing the food, the gold, the silver, the machinery, and all this. So finally, the rest of the world said enough's enough.
Right. Well, and I think by the end of this discussion, people will certainly understand it. But you're right. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa comprise the BRICS, and these are countries that are uniting in common interests and doing it without the bullying, if you will, of the Western hegemony, and they're beginning to set themselves apart from the rest of the world. And
what is a BRICS? What does it mean? Why do you think they're so important today? I mean, they're the most powerful force in the world today.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with talking about the Belt Road, is this coalition of countries standing up against the Western hegemony. And that's really what it is. You know, it's not just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. You have well over a dozen countries that have already applied, such as Algeria and Argentina and Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Nicaragua, Turkey, Indonesia, Senegal, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Egypt, Kazakhstan, and the biggest one of all, Saudi Arabia, has formally applied to the BRICS nations. And so when you talk about this growing cohesion of countries, there are others that they're already set their eyes on. And in Brazil's backyard, you have Argentina. In Latin America, you have Nicaragua. In Central America, Algeria. You have Egypt. In near South Africa, you have Algeria, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, as we just talked about, the United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, Senegal, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, India, Indonesia, Thailand. All of these countries and their neighbors that are growing together are forming a massive, very imposing, not only from a GDP, but you put all these countries together and their military might is very, very strong as well. And those are the BRICS plus. Now they're talking about adding more countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Bolivia, Chile, Cuba, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, Azerbaijan, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. The list goes on and on and on. And
okay. So what that means is right now they're dealing in this.
Correct.
In 1944, this became the reserve currency of the world right after World War II at the Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Like I said, this is toilet paper today because this is now fake money. So the rest of the world is saying enough of you sending us your toilet paper.
That's exactly right.
You take our materials, you take our production, you take this, and you send us this trash here. So that's what Andy is talking about. Is so crucial. An average person can't see it. So now, can you go into the Belt and Road project because that's the
right and equally as important to being forced to take the dollar is if you are on the wrong side of the Western. On the Western ideology, then you get sanctioned, you get kicked out of SWIFT. And the weaponizing of the dollar, I think, is what has accelerated the union of all of these countries. And when
Andy, can you explain what the SWIFT is? Because guys like me don't.
Sure. The SWIFT system is basically the oxygen that is needed for cross-border payments to breathe. In other words, you're not allowed to send your money from one country to another unless it routes through the SWIFT system, which is basically a computer system, if you will, or a message board system. That allows banks to trade money back and forth and clearing through a U.S. settlement bank system. So in order to trade dollars, you have to have access to the SWIFT system. And if you are kicked out of the SWIFT system, you cannot trade dollars. And if you can't trade dollars, you can't buy oil and you can't sell your goods globally. In essence, it isolates you. Well, unless, of course, you're trading your Iran and you're trading your oil to China for the Petro Yuan bond, which is immediately convertible.
But what happened? But didn't America exercise SWIFT? I mean, they punished a whole bunch of countries just recently.
Absolutely. And no better example than what they did with Russia, kicking them out of SWIFT. And you saw what Russia did in retaliation. They are selling their goods in gold and in rupee and for ruble and for yuan, and they are sidestepping. It is this bullying, as you said at the beginning, it is this hypocrisy that is making everyone come to the table. They're accumulating things that are real, and they are going to use them to back a new system, while the West.
And you bring up so many subjects that are beyond most people.
Well, you know what? I think if you follow the narrative, the bottom line is the world is revolting against the West and our hegemony.
We're following right now. The Bank of International Settlements is a central bank.
That is correct.
And what they said in 2017 was that
2019,
gold is now money.
That's right. And that's why, and there is no coincidence that the central banks bought more of it last year than at any time since 1967, and the most on record, second most on record. So, you know, they see what's coming and they're moving ahead of this. Yep. And the rest of us in this country are more concerned about, you know, woke and things that are just completely missing the ball when the rest of the world is growing together in a very tight-knit group.
Janet Yellen is as green as they come. She's talking about climate change and all this stuff. Meanwhile, the whole place is going to hell.